Hello, Everetts Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. This is my first live broadcast, and I'm really excited about it because I've been teaching for over 25 years in different classrooms and different places. But the opportunity to do a live broadcast in my own studio and then pass on my information and knowledge is a really exciting day. Today I'm going to do a demo, number one of two parts. The next demo, part 2, will be next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Those of you that go to YouTube will be able to replay this program on YouTube. You just go to YouTube and then log into Everetts Watercolors, and the replay will be there for you to look again. Now, the concept today on a landscape, what I want to do is, I was thinking, okay, I want to do a scene with some mountains, trees, maybe a barn and a road and so forth. So that was the original concept. So let's get started with the demo. I'll show you how I started this the thinking process. I'll take you to my painting table, and here I have my palette and my brushes. I'm going to use 4 brushes today. The first brush is a 3/4 inch flat brush. Then I have a 1/2 inch flat brush. I have a long-haired rigger or liner brush. These are all natural hair brushes here. And then I have what is called a designer round, which is a round brush with a very fine point at the end for detail. Those are the 4 brushes I'm going to use. Over here I have a piece of Gemini 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, and this is a 1/4 sheet, which is about 11 by 15 inches in size. And I've got it in a portrait configuration today because I want to do a landscape in this direction. So first thing I do when I plan a painting is I get some photographs. So let me move you to my close-up camera. And the photographs I choose are things that I've taken photographs of myself, and I've taken out of some other references. But I like this tree line over here in the background, and the roadway coming down the section here. And also here's another one with buildings. I like the tree line here, but also these interesting looking buildings here along the edge. So what I do then, after I get my references together and take a look at them, then I start designing a painting. And my design drawing will look something like this. The first thing I make sure of is I pick the horizon. Horizon line will be above the center of the paper. And then I've drawn in some rough mountain areas in the background. And I've got a tree line, I got a building, I got this nice dirt road coming down in the foreground here. And then I may add in some fence. That's part 2. Just part 1, I'm going to be the sky, some of the middle ground, and the foreground area with the road. That's today's demonstration. Okay. So in my painting paper, I've already put some marks on here. I'll move you back to the overhead. We go back to the overhead camera, and what I have here is the sketch I just showed you, but I've transferred it to the 1/4 sheet piece of paper. And the first thing I make sure I do is identify the horizon line. And that horizon line is going to be in this area right here, which is above the center of the paper. And then the next items I'll put in some of the, I'll sketch in some of the shapes for references, the tree line, and this interesting road. Now I know I usually do a curvular road to give a little interest, a little shape to the road, but I'll just draw in some. These are just guidelines. So sketching is really a guideline, and I do a lot of sketching. I sketch every day for practice. And over here, I'm going to put in that building I showed you in the photograph. This is an old barn, and there's a house that the farmer lives on. It's got a little silo out here on the sideline, and there'll be some fence posts. And I've got a little roadway that's going to go back into the house. And also I'm going to add in some things here in the foreground, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So to get started, and also I'm going to just gradually, I'm going to put a little mountain range way off in the background. And I'll show you how I put that in. But now I'm just putting a little reference line in there in the background. Okay. So the first thing I'll do is I prepare my paints for the sky. And you'll see here I'm mixing up a lot of blues. I usually have 2 or 3 colors of blues. I usually have a dark, a medium, and a light blue. And I'll go through colors and things in my later programs. There's plenty of time to go over that. I just want you to see a little demo of how to start a landscape. And then we have plenty of time to talk about my art talk on Saturday. We can answer questions, and we can go over a lot of details on Saturday. It'll be about the same time on Saturday, and I'll put the announcement out. And if you follow me on YouTube, subscribing, you'll be able to get notifications when that happens. Now, I mix a little bit of dark blue, a little bit of medium blue, and then I'll put just a touch of purple in there. This is ultramarine blue and cobalt blue with a little bit of quinacridone violet. Again, gives me a different colors. Okay, now to put the sky in, I'm going to use a little wet on wet technique. So I'll put a little water up, a little moisture up here in the top. And the other thing I do also is I'm going to use some artist tape. Now this is painter's tape that you can buy in any hardware store. And I'm going to cover up this area down here that I don't want to get any paint on right now. And so I just protect. This is like masking, masking fluid, but just using tape is just as effective for small areas. Oh. So protect the white areas, that's the next thing I do, and then we're going to start painting. Now the sky, I start with a big brush strokes with this 3/4 inch brush, and at the top of the sky is always going to be darker. If you look at the perspective in the sky, the top of the sky is always darker, and as you come down toward the horizon, I'm going to add more water to my brush. When you see me move off to the side, I'm picking up water on my brush, and that dilutes the paint. We don't use white paint in watercolor. We save the white paper, and if we want a lighter color, we add water. So coming down toward the horizon, and again with this tape here, I don't care because now I've got it protected, so I can go ahead and just put that right in. Also, I might point out I've got my board, my incredible board, which is my painting board here. I've got it tilted at an angle. I've got some rolls of tape underneath. They gave me a little incline so that the water will flow down naturally just by gravity. So now we'll let that sit for a few moments. Now while that's drying, I can go ahead and start some of the foreground. So I'm going to take another brush. That one's got the blue in it, but I'll take another brush, which is the 1/2-inch brush. I'm going to mix up different colors of green for the grass and weeds and things like that. So I'm going to pick up. Now, just to share with you, on the foreground, I found a couple more photographs. So let me bring my close up again. So on the one side of the road, I'm going to have maybe some wildflowers and some tall grass and so forth. So I got the idea from this photograph here. So I always look at a photograph, or if I usually paint on location, and I really paint what I see. So this just gives me an idea of some areas I'm going to paint on this particular painting. This photograph gives me a little more texture-y idea, maybe in the foreground. And then I'm going to put some rows of a crop on the left side next to the road. So I've got some ideas here that I'm going to implement on the painting. So off to the right side, I'm going to work with that that concept of putting in some wild grass and wildflowers. So I'm mixing up a green, but I'm also, if you see what I'm doing here, I'm mixing in a little yellow. That'll give me a yellow-green. Then I have green. Let's see, you can't see that unless I move you over, so I'll put you back on over. Yeah, I have two cameras here. One's a close-up where I can show you detail, and then I've got this overhead to show you the palette and what I'm mixing. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing some green, but I've mixed a little bit of yellow to give me a yellow-green, and then pick up a little bit of that blue and to give me a darker green. So I have three values or three colors of green here, which in a painting like this, you got such a large area, you need a variety of color and value. So starting up here at the top, I'll start putting in some of this light green color, yellow mixed in with that middle green. And as I come forward, I'm going to start putting in some a little darker color, a little darker value. And then as I move forward all the way to the end, forward here, the colors get even darker. Now also, let me pick up another brush here. This is the liner brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of, I'm going to pick up some brown, and I'm going to pick up some dirt color. This is burnt sienna and a little bit of yellow ochre. Mix up some ground color. And I'm just going to put that in here to break up some of that green look. So this will give me the textury roughness of that foreground. Okay, and again, this is a real blocking in process where you're just putting in some colors. Now here I can also paint some negative shapes. I got some tall grass down here. I can paint in some positive negative shapes. Positive is where the paint goes. and the negative shape is between the paint. So I got different shapes there. I can play with that concept there also. Okay. All right. Now also I'm watching up here. I'm watching the paint, and I go next to the light and I can see the paint starting to dry up here. So what I want to do now at the top, while the sky is still damp, I'm going to start putting in those faraway mountains. So up here you can see, and the fact that it's wet will give me a fuzzy edge, which is what I want, because it's going to look misty or far away. And you'll see me over here hitting the sponge. That takes out some of the moisture and some of the paint off the brush, so it controls the amount of moisture. And I'm also changing the color. Got a little bit of that purple color in there to give a little hue on that, little purple hue. And again, varying the color, varying the values. Now these are far away hills, way in the background. And I did that while the sky was still a little damp. That way it gives me a rough, fuzzy edge, not a real hard edge. Gives me a soft edge is what I'm looking for. So I had to time that then while I was waiting for that to get a little drier. I did the foreground, and now I can go back and work a little bit on this background. The background is the mountains. And that gives me that far away, fuzzy look of a mountain range. Okay. Now I can go over here now and work on this. I think I can take this tape off now because I've pretty well protected it. So I'll remove the tape, get that out of the way. Now I'll work on the left side over here. Now the left side, as I mentioned before, is I'm going to use this concept of farm, landscape of a farm area, which would have possibly a field. Farm, you'd probably growing potatoes or corn. In this case, we might just make this a potato patch. It doesn't matter what it is. But again, I'm going to pick up some of that green because these are plants that have not been pulled up yet. They're still out in the field. So we're going to put some color in there. These are the plants, or the bushes of the vegetables growing here in the field. And again, this gives me an opportunity to show the perspective I'm building directional lines here that takes me back to the area of interest, or the focal point. The focal point is really going to be those buildings back there with the right white roofs and everything. They will show up very well against this lighter backgrounds. Okay. And we'll put in some more of this vegetation. And we'll do one or two more quick rows here. Again, giving you some perspective here. Now in between, what I'm going to do is pick up this liner brush and pick up some more dirt color, which is the browns. A brown, I got yellow ochre, I got burnt sienna brown, and I'm even mixing it with some of the purple and the blue, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to start putting the ground in between here to give it the look of a vegetable garden, vegetable farm. And I can leave some white paper. I go back and fill that in later. But I just want to get the feel, the texture, and the color. And you'll notice these lines, these directional lines of the vegetation will also put you back, take you back into the focal point, which is the building, and so forth. I'm gonna leave. I usually leave a lot of whites in the beginning because I can always go back and fill those back in with glazes and so forth. So I leave a lot of white showing right now, just to give me, again, a chance to modify or make some minor changes. And if I see an area, I also have my fifth brush is a box of tissues. And if I put something down, I put a little green in the wrong spot there. So what I do is I go and take the tissue and go back and pick up some of that color. Okay. Now the last one I'll work on here is I'll put some detail around that building, and then we'll let this dry. So now behind the buildings, which is really the middle ground, I'm mixing up some darker. Right now the background is a light color, and as you come forward to really make it stand out, I'll be putting in some darker color. The darker color then will give me the contrast, and that is still damp, so I'm just going to be able to get around these buildings now at this point, and go back later when it dries and go back and do some more detail. But I'm just trying to work the edges on this building here. This is the impact area, so I'm taking a little more time here. Now I'm going to turn the paper around so I can work on the edge a little better. And I'll change color. It's always a good idea that when you're painting is not leave the same color over and over again. Modify the color, change the color. This has to be a dark color, so I'm just putting it in there. And some of it is starting to bleed in with the background, which will be okay because I'll darken it up later. I'm just getting those edges around the building just to show you a little bit of the darks that I'll be putting in. As we get further away from the building or the focal point, then less detail and less fussing with the brush strokes. The only point I really make a lot of time on is around the impact area. Okay. Now the only other place I want to work on is the other side of the road here, which is another tree line. So I'll put that in. Again, this will be a dark colors, and I'll mix in some more browns and so forth with the greens. Okay. And the fun part's coming up because I'm going to put the road in, and then we'll let this one dry for the demo number 1, and then we'll come back to this next week and finish it off and put some more detail in. But the fun part's coming up because I want to do the road, and this will knock off 80% of this painting is the leaving some whites. This will go back in. We'll fill those in as needed, and a little more around here. Okay. Now here's the fun part. Now, first of all, let me clean my palette up a little bit because I want to mix some road colors. So I'll take my sponge, and this is a porcelain palette, which is very easy to clean up. If you've never worked on porcelain, then you should try it out. And again, we'll talk about supplies and so forth another time. Now, what I'm going to do is I do have supplies on my website, Everetts Watercolors, www.everettswatercolors.com, and I do have a supply page on there for my students at a convenience for them to find things. And the things I'm using here today is on my website. And let's see, I'm mixing up a little bit of dirt color and some darks, some darker colors. And the same idea about getting near and far. So for this road, I'm going to use basically the three colors. I'll use a light brown, a middle brown, and a dark brown. And I'm going to start way in the background here. So I'm going to start with a light color as I come forward. Get starting behind that in the horizon. Come down. Start picking up a little darker. A little darker. Now I also want to change my brush stroke, because this is where, as you get closer, as your eyes get closer to the subject matter, and I'm just laying the brush down, and I'm going to drag it down. This is the fun part. This is the rough edges. This gives you the texture of the road. Just dragging it, load the brush up, bring it in, and just drag it down across the paper. And I'm following the contour of the road. Okay. Now the last thing I'll do, final little touch here before we leave this little demos today, I'm going to take my liner brush and I'm going to go back in. I'm just going to put in little, these could be rocks or irregularities on the road, just to give us some interest. They could be tire tracks. They could be, you know, where the old truck came riding down the road. It could be ruts, rough spots. And the liner brush is not just to make fine lines, but you can use it as a texture tool for applying paint and brush techniques. Okay, now I've got that. There's a lot of detail, a lot more detail I want to put into this in part 2 of this demonstration next week. But in summary, let me come back to the main table here. In summary, I use photo references. I don't try to use my imagination. I think using photo references to give you an idea. And of course, I don't copy the references right exactly as they are. I use them as a tool. Then I do a design sketch. It gives me, I identify the elements, whether it's the sky, the trees, the road, a building, another object that you want to have. But you define your elements in your landscape or in your painting, whatever it is. And then I showed you, I demonstrated a graded wash. I started at the top. I started at the top of the sky and came down. It got dark and went down to lights. Also, even on the ground, I went from light from me out forward to dark, and the same with the ground. on the road. Went from far to near. Went from light to dark. This gives a sense of depth, not only in the value from dark to light, it gives you a sense of value, and the directional lines in the field and things like that. So those are little things that you can do in landscapes to create depth. I just want to thank you all for joining me today. Do me a favor and please subscribe to my channel. It'll make it easier for you to follow and get notifications about my next show. I'll be on Saturday around noontime, 12:30 or 1. I'm going to put the words out, and I'll have an art talk, and we'll talk about maybe some things we did today in painting. And if you have questions, write them down, and if you have questions or comments, write them down at the bottom of the replay. At the end of this broadcast, this will be recorded, and you'll be able to look at it again and make comments. So leave your comments on the replay. I'd appreciate reading them, find out some of your thoughts, some of your questions, and so forth. This will help me design another programs and down the road. You can write to me, email ewc@everettswatercolors.com. I'll have that at the bottom of the comments also. I'll have that at the bottom of the replay. And you can always visit my website, www.everettswatercolors.com. I want to thank you for joining in, and I had a good time today. And remember, this is the first one around, so I'm going to be learning as I go and sharing with you ideas that I have. So part 2 of this landscape demo, I'm going to pick up a lot more detail and finish off what we have here. So you have a nice day, and we'll see you at the next program.